Hello, welcome back to my channel. Your local Mikey Madison dupe here. Just kidding, Sabrina here, and welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I filmed anything because of Thanksgiving break and me starting a new job, but here I am. And today I'll be talking about a topic that's probably going to be more relatable to a lot more people compared to my normal spiritual or manifestation content. And today I am going to talk about the important things that I learned after I was diagnosed by my therapist to have BPD. So for people who don't know, BPD stands for borderline personality disorder, and it's very different from bipolar. BPD and bipolar are complete different things. I'm not sure what the abbreviation for bipolar is, but BPD in particular stands for borderline personality disorder, and that was what I was diagnosed of about 3 years ago. So the way I was diagnosed was I always felt like there was something kind of wrong with me, or there's something about me that is very different, and that's something that's been repeatedly reiterated to me throughout my entire life from my friends or my classmates. And so I was very aware that like I'm quote unquote not like the other girls, but I always thought that it manifested in a negative way because I was also diagnosed with depression when I was 16 years old. And sorry, this might be a little bit late, but trigger warning, because there will be a lot of sensitive mental health topics that gets brought up in this conversation, but I feel like these conversations are very much necessary and we have to normalize them because a lot of people out there needs to hear these things. So first of all, let's start to talk about what BPD really is and how it manifests in a person and what are usually the cause of it. So what happens is as a kid, during your childhood, if you constantly go through some kind of abuse, whether it's emotional abuse or physical abuse every single day. So for example, if you had an alcoholic dad or a narcissistic mom who would berate you, call you names, say that you're worthless every single day, or the alcoholic dad just beat you up physically every single day, and that's something you constantly have to live through during your childhood without any solutions or any help. And after you grow up and become an adult, your brain is so traumatized to the point that it just cannot function like a normal person's brain anymore because of all the abuse you endured in your childhood. It reshapes the way your brain views the normal world. And what happens is, after years of living with excess amount of cortisol and also living with years of depression and suppressed emotions, and also being in fight or flight mode ever since you're a kid, your brain is constantly in coping mode, and it will take almost like a lifetime of effort to continuously retrain your brain and to also repair yourself to calm your brain down so that it's not in the fight or flight mode anymore. So a lot of the symptoms and causes and the effects of BPD are actually very similar, and it also correlates to CPTSD, but these two are also complete different diagnoses. So please go to a professional and get a real diagnosis to figure out what it is that you're really suffering from if you feel like you might fall under any of these categories. So let's dive a little bit deeper into BPD. So when you have BPD, your brain is constantly in fight or flight mode, and because you experienced through so much negative things when you were younger, every time when something happens, like something very small happens, like you get into a very, very small fight or a very small misunderstanding with your friend, your brain immediately downward spirals and think that, oh, our friendship is over, that this person doesn't like me anymore, or like, oh, she hates me, we had a misunderstanding, but I think she hates me now. Your brain kind of have a very extreme reaction that doesn't really match the matter that actually happened. To put it in other words, your brain cannot really comprehend the real weight of the issue because a misunderstanding is something that always happens, and it's just like a very small issue. But then for someone with BPD, because their emotions are so out of control and out of whack, and because the things that happened to them when they were younger were so serious and damning, their brain immediately weights any small issues as something huge, because when they were younger, that was something that actually occurred in their life. So any misunderstanding with their parents can result in them getting physically beaten or just berated and get called names and gets verbally abused for hours and hours to no ends. So as the BPD person gets older, they will automatically comprehend any small issues as something huge and dire and that will have really big consequences, even though it wouldn't. So let's say you have a friend who you know have BPD and you have a small misunderstanding or a small fight with them, and you see them having a really huge reaction to the things that you said, even though you didn't think it was that serious or the things you said were meant to be a jab, but you realize that your friend took it really negatively and blew up on you. And the reason why for that is because in their head, they're so used to perceiving any small matters as a huge issue that they just don't have the emotional ability to control themselves to actually see the small matter as just a small issue until they go through some kind of therapy and actually train with people to rewire their brain. And while I'm very aware of the fact that it is very hard to be on the receiving end of the BPD person's actions, I really hope everyone have some more sympathy and empathy towards your BPD friend or girlfriend or family member, because they must have gone through tremendous abuse in their childhood to end up the way that they are today. So if they're actively working on their issue and they're actively seeking help, please have some patience with them, and just know that if you point out the issue in a logical way, people who have BPD will usually understand. Because what happens is, when we were younger, we didn't have an adult that would give us proper response or logical response to our issues. We didn't have adults that have the emotional intelligence of an actual adult. We were dealing with narcissists and just adult childs, basically. That's what we had as parents, most likely. So when we're older, when we see that someone is willing to communicate with us and trying their best to understand us, we will calm down, and that will definitely shift our mindset, because now we recognize that, okay, this person is not like the adults that we experienced when we were younger. These people are completely different. And the second main point that I hope people understand about people that are suffering from BPD is that for people with BPD, we have very bad and very critical internal self-talk, because chances are when we were younger, any small mistakes will spiral into a big issue, or we are heavily criticized for every single one of our missteps because our parents were just very mean to us. And growing up, if you only ever experience verbal abuse, your internal dialogue will also turn abusive towards yourself, because that's the only kind of voice that you learn to have, and that is the main voice that you adopt because that's what your environment has put onto you. And so as a result, a lot of us tend to look at the glass half empty instead of half full, and that is going to be an issue as we get older, because let's say we get into a relationship, and every time we get into a fight with someone, our brain immediately spirals downward and we only see the fight that we just had, and then we somehow end up ignoring all the other days when things were peaceful and when things were good and we had a very good time with our partner. Like, our brain will just start hyper focusing on that one negative matter that happened, even though all the other days of the week things were good. And to be honest, as someone with BPD, I'd say that it is definitely on us to stop that pattern of thinking and to also learn to judge people more fairly, because it is very unfair on our partners or friends or people close to us that they treat us well for like the entire year, but then there's like those few times that where we actually get into something with them and then we start hyper focusing on just a few days. That is a very unfair judgment to the people around us that have treated us well but end up making mistakes here and there. And for people that are dealing with a partner or a friend that has BPD, I'd say when an argument like that happens, just give the other person some space and some time to really think things through. And when they say something that's super mean, super out of pocket, just let them know that they're completely out of line. And then that person if that person is someone who is sensible, they'll realize that they overstep their lines and they're overreacting. I know this is not something that's easy to deal with, but I do think that if someone is genuinely working on themselves and working on seeing people around them and treating them more fairly, things will slowly start to get better. So in the very beginning, the person might be someone who tends to overreact, but if they're truly working on themselves as time go by, what you would really need to do is to just give them time and space to calm down and for them to think things through, and they'll come to the right conclusion themselves. And what not to do during these times is to not give the BPD person space and keep pushing them for an answer, or to keep dragging an argument that's not really going anywhere for way too long. Because the more you drag the negative conversation on, the more the BPD person will just spiral instead of having the space they need to see things a bit more fairly. And things will eventually get to a point where there's no return. And actually, I have personally lost a few of my friends from stuff like this. Like what I just mentioned about getting into a really heated argument and just didn't really have the space to think things through. So I said things that I probably shouldn't have said. But now looking back, I know that it was a huge mismatch because they also just weren't really equipped to deal with someone that do have BPD. So this is a very important piece of advice, but if you're someone with BPD, you really need to surround yourself with people who have the emotional intelligence and also patience to help you out, especially during times of misunderstanding or miscommunications, because you don't want someone who's also quick-tempered and things will just go very bad very fast. You want people around you who can calmly just tell you the truth, because the truth is all you really need. And we also really need partners who are very solution-oriented so that they know to take the right course of actions to make sure that things go well, even though you guys just had an argument. Because someone who is approaching you with the intention of resolving things versus someone who's approaching you with the intention to, I don't know, be on the right side of things, these two train of thoughts will result in very different actions that's coming from a partner. And the last point I want to make for today is that I hope everyone with BPD realizes that your natural train of thought is a very downward spiraling train of thought. So you'll have a lot of negative assumptions about, let's say, you send out a lot of job applications. Chances are you think that none of them will probably end up giving you anything good. And if you're out there trying to find someone to date on dating app, your brain will also spiral and tell you that you're not lovable. And that is because while growing up, your environment was so hostile around you that your brain learned to cope with it. And then you also adopt the fact that everything around you is just so negative, and then a lot of things in life are inherently negative until proven otherwise. And what happens is that will end up creating a lot of self-sabotaging tendencies, because once you're out of the inherently negative environment that you had when you were a kid and you start to live a different set of life, your brain, because it wants to protect you, it will continuously tell you to expect the worst out of life. But when you act with these assumptions that you are, like, everything around you is hostile and is out there to get you, the course of action you take will not be the best course of action to keep things peaceful and to keep things going well. So what happens is, let's say you had some kind of fight with your friends, with one person from the group of friends. And then what ended up happening is you immediately assume that now that the entire group isn't friends with you anymore, or because you fought with one person, now that entire group are beefing with you. So what happens is you go on social media, you talk badly about that entire group of people. And now what happens is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where the entire group of people sees your message and they think that, oh, you're now against them because you think that they're all siding with the other party, when maybe some of those people are now neutral, but because now that they see you talking bad, they're also making you the enemy now. This is a very common pattern of behavior among people who have BPD, which is a downward spiral that usually happens out of something small that they could have fixed, but instead of thinking that it's actually fixable, they don't really see that due to their old pattern of thinking. So, and then the only thing they know is to escalate the situation in a bad way, because that's just what happened to them growing up. So then they also emulate that without realizing, and then what happens is everything just starts blowing up around them, like how it did happen in their life. So if you catch yourself consistently having the negative assumption out of almost everything in your life, I hope you will at least catch that and realize that the life that you live now is completely different from the life that you were living before. And the life that you lived before feels so daunting on you is because you're literally a kid. You had no power over a lot of things. But now that you're an adult, there are a lot of things that you could choose to change. Things won't ever be the same again. So those negative things that happen after each and every single day to you won't ever happen again. That pattern will literally never appear in your life ever again, as long as you are aware of your own current thought patterns and know that you have the power to make much better moves now. And also, it's not easy to catch these negative downward spiral thought patterns at all, because these thought patterns and your ego are actually trying to protect you by telling you that, oh, the outside is dangerous, you need to prepare for this and that. It's out of a protective instinct. So a lot of times it might not even occur to you that that is like a negative thought pattern that you have. And that is because our brain are hardwired to help us survive, and because we have to survive in such a negative environment for so long, that protective layer is very hard to rip off, and it takes a lot of inner work, it takes a lot of shadow work, and it's going to take a lot of time in therapy to really peel off that protective layer that you had on. But it is very doable, it is possible, and you can do it. And that work is best done when you're moved out and you know that you're living in a place where you're completely safe in. And that's when you can really tell your subconscious that we're safe now, we can let that shell of armor go. But I know sometimes that's not very easy these days, especially with how high rent costs. So whenever you can, find yourself a safe space, sit there, meditate, and start talking to yourself and letting yourself know that you're in a complete different environment now, and you're also an adult. You have the things that happened in your past will not happen again now that you're an adult, and to slowly undo these negative thought patterns. That's it for today's video. I know it's going to be a lot to take in for everyone, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.